Venezuela, the candidate for the presidency of the country, held campaigns closing in view of the elections to be held next Sunday, July the 28th. In Brazil, President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva called on the world to mobilize against hunger, created the Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. And in Russia, President Vladimir Putin received his Syrian counterpart Bashar al-Assad in Moscow in the 80th anniversary of diplomatic relations between both countries. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll be with the news. Stay with us. In Venezuela, the candidate for the presidency of the country held campaign closing in view of the elections to be held next Sunday, July the 28th. The candidate for the Democratic Action Party, Luis Eduardo Martinez, Antonio Carri for the Pencil Islands, and Jose Brito for the Primero Venezuela, as well as Daniel Ceballos for Voluntad Popular, and the candidate for the Conde Party, Benjamin Rauseu, finished their electoral campaigns in different sectors of Caracas and some states of the country, such as Lara and Aragua. Also, after his trip through the Portuguese state, the presidential candidate of the Great Patriotic Pole, Nicolás Maduro, went to the Tulare state, where the people received him with slogans to back up his candidacy. In a large rally in the Iribarren municipality, the candidate thanks the people of Lara for their unconditional support in the defense of democracy against the coup intents of the Venezuelan far right and their U.S. allies. On Wednesday, the development of the Republic Plan, a military police operation to secure the electoral material, the centers, and the security of the voters was carried out. The authorities asked to respect the official results of the electoral power. Let's see the details.
It is the usual deployment of security forces before each electoral process. The Republic Plan has 18 phases that seek to guarantee the security of voters and electoral material, process of several months of preparation. More than 380 military, police, and security personnel will participate in the operation. It will deploy operations of protection and custody with the voters, the voting centers, transfer, custody and security of technological and non-technological material. With this situation of aggression against the Republic, against the Venezuelan state and against the people of Venezuela, the people of Venezuela have demonstrated their vocation to go to vote and to define their destiny in the coming hours. During the day, the authorities warned of a campaign that intends to generate the matrix of fraud, bypassing the electoral power. The attacks are permanent, and from here I denounce the media campaign paid by dirty money, money from drug trafficking, money that has been stolen from you Venezuelans, and that money is being used by the foreign media to apply a campaign of destruction against the Venezuelan people and seeking to hinder these elections. The prosecutor assured that this constitutes a crime. Whoever usurps this function is committing a crime and must be subject to investigation, prosecution, and arrest, because here there is no double standard of parallel de facto governments. The Minister of Defense criticized those who try to force the armed forces to take a position on a possible fraud or results based on surveys. These militarologists, opinionators by trade, distorters of the truth, would then transfer the authority to say whether this is correct or this is correct to the Bolivarian National Armed Forces. And that cannot and will not be so. The Bolivarian National Armed Force has its functions and tasks clearly defined. We are not the ones who are going to decide if this is fraud or not fraud.
No somos nosotros los que vamos a decidir si esto es un fraude o no es fraude.
Ratified that the results will only be given by the votes at the polls and the figures delivered by the electoral power.
En el retoma al teleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
In an exclusive interview for the multi-platform teleSUR, Spanish journalist Ignacio Ramonet clarified to the international community the normality of the development of the Venezuelan armed forces on the occasion of the presidential elections, emphasized that this is a tradition like American countries to guarantee electoral security.
En particular para los televidentes que nos están viendo.
Particularly for the viewers who are watching us maybe in Europe or in another continent and who may wonder, because it is very impressive when you see the military deployment, and it is said there are 168,000 troops that are going to protect the elections, and the Minister of Defense speaks, and they may say to themselves, well, Venezuela is obviously a country that is in the hands of the armed forces, a garrison. No. I want us to tell our friends that this is the norm in every Latin American country.
Venezuela's Great Housing Mission has built so far nearly 5 million houses for working families and seeks to reach the total of 7 billion by 2030. Far-right intentions of they win the elections, however, is to privatize housing and the Bolivarian housing project. Our special envoy to Venezuela, Brian Mir, tell us more.
Venezuela's social housing program, called the Great Housing Mission, has created nearly 5 million housing units for working-class families since it was first founded by President Hugo Chavez in 2011. Like the Jorge Rodriguez Padre apartments in Caracas' Antimano parish, a large percentage of them are built by the people who will end up owning them, who receive technical support and training in areas like construction, electrical work, and plumbing to manage the projects themselves.
Consagrado en nuestra Constitución en el artículo 82 que dice que
Article 82, which is consecrated in our Constitution, guarantees dignified housing as a right for all people who live within Venezuelan territory. They don't necessarily have to be Venezuelan by birth. Everyone who lives in our homeland and considers themselves a resident has a right to housing, but the Venezuelan opposition wants to destroy everything that has ever been created by the power of the people.
The Great Housing Mission, which has a goal of reaching 7 million housing units by the year 2030, has won praise worldwide. But as the presidential elections loom, many are wondering what will happen to it if the far-right coalition, which has announced plans for deep austerity cuts and privatizations, wins the election.
We don't have to go back so far to figure out what the far-right tried to do. You know, when the opposition won the legislative elections in 2015, one of the first and one of the still act they tried to pass was precisely to privatize the housing mission. It was called a lot of backlash from grassroots movements and was eventually struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court.
Venezuela's presidential elections are marked for July 28th. Brian Mir, teleSUR, Caracas.
With that story, let's take a very short break, but remember you can join us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. In Brazil, President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva called on the world to mobilize against hunger, created the Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. On Wednesday, Rio de Janeiro announced the creation of this organism as a priority of the Brazilian presidency in the group of the 20 largest economies of the planet. This mechanism will officially launch in November and will seek a way to fight hunger and replicate initiatives that were at the local level. The G20 finance ministers will also try to advance in the idea of creating a tax for the super-rich as subject without consensus.
No issue is more topical and challenging for humanity. We cannot naturalize such disparity. Hunger is the most degrading of human deprivations. It is an attack on life, an aggression against freedom.
É atentado à vida, uma agressão à liberdade.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned that the global effort to eliminate hunger by 2030 is faltering, with more than 700 million people experiencing the chronic hunger in 2023. This alarming trend is attributed to a combination of ongoing conflicts, climate change, and economic crisis, which have still progressed towards the goal set nearly a decade ago. In Haiti, authorities take action of fears of the anthrax epidemic, affirming that at least 12 affected patients. The government has confirmed the cases reported in the town of Front Royal in Petit de Gouverne in the west of the country. According to the health officials, the cases were reported after several people consumed the meat of an animal that died suddenly. On Wednesday, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, addressed his nation to explain the reasons for his resignation to run for re-election. In this sense, in a speech delivered from Oval Office, making his first appearance after the resignations, President Biden affirmed that his decision was based on betting on a new generation as the best way to advance and unite the country.
Just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country.
Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to join us on our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on the screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Let's stay connected and informed with teleSUR. One financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin received his Syrian counterpart Bashar al-Assad in Moscow on Thursday. The last visit of the Syrian head of state to Moscow took place in March 2023. This new meeting coincided with the 80th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. During the meeting, President Bashar al-Assad stressed that the relations between Damascus and Moscow maintains a level of trust that demonstrates the maturity of the two peoples. In Spain, activists and unions demand the repeal of law, which they claim has restricted the population's freedom of demonstration. Let's see the details with our correspondent Andrés Flores.
The law, popularly known in Spain as the gag law, was passed in 2015 and provides for penalties for unauthorized demonstrations, resistance to authority, and dissemination of police images. This law has been criticized for limiting fundamental freedoms. For activist and former Congresswoman Maria Dantas, for this law, everything falls under the category of disobedience to authority.
Disrespect to authority. Everything falls under disobedience to authority. Everything falls under resistance to authority. Then joining also with Article 36 in 23. For example, that police officers cannot be recorded, which by the way is unconstitutional because there is already a sentence.
The inability to videotape police officers has become a real obstacle for the public to document police abuses. This is in addition to the fines. Activist Nate Rue experienced it firsthand.
When they held a no to logging protest, they were trying to stop the felling of trees to build a subway line in Madrid. The activists have been fined more than €20,000.
But despite political speeches insisting on the possibility of repealing this law in the current context, there are many activists who point out the lack of political will to do so.
We have had from the workers' commissions we demanded the government to repeal it. There was no possibility that the parliamentary support of this government would approve such modification, and we believe that this legislature is inexcusable. The political forces that support the coalition government must have as a priority the repeal of the gag law. Today there has to be a consensus, there is one, and for reasons beyond the law, for other reasons of political balance, this debate cannot be postponed any longer.
There is no political will. We have had this law for 9 years. In fact, the PP in the Congress in 2015, August 2015, approved this law only with an absolute majority. The PSOE, which at that time was the opposition, voted against it, and has been saying since 2015 that it was going to repeal, not reform, that it was going to completely repeal this law. It turns out that we have already had several years of government of the Socialist Party, and there is no repeal.
The second president of the government, Yolanda Diaz, has announced an agreement between the SUMAR coalition and the PSOE to repeal the gag law, but for the moment no progress has been made.
teleSUR, Barcelona.
Now, changing topics. In Colombia, the Binational Symphony Orchestra commemorates Simón Bolívar's birthday with a concert at the Elias Zapata Olivera National Center, an initiative of the country's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Organized by the Colombian Ministry of Culture, the National Symphonic Association, the National Center for the Arts, the Elias Zapata Olivera, and the Binational Orchestra of Colombia and Venezuela to strengthen cultural relations between the two nations. In addition to commemorating the birth of Simón Bolívar, an emblematic figure of the independence efforts of several South American countries, including Colombia and Venezuela. In this regard, this Colombia-Venezuela Binational Symphonic Orchestra has been enhanced through the Sounds for Peace built-in program, which focuses on promoting the stability of artistic and musical organizations and groups, as well as strengthening artistic practices and expression at the national, regional and territorial levels.
This orchestra is an important exercise of acknowledgement and symbolic and social integration, also of the musicians who have migrated from Venezuela, and it has also allowed to start conversations with the Colombian musicians and with the processes of the symphonic orchestras of our country. That is why this concert is organized by a joint effort of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Culture in alliance with the Ministry of Culture of Venezuela and with the National Association of Symphonic Orchestra. This process is also coordinated with our Ministry of Culture's great program, Sounds for Peace 15.
Nuestra labor ha sido arduamente progresiva.
Our work has been arduously progressive. Our main objective with the foundation or creation of this orchestra is to provide a socio-cultural and artistic space of the highest musical level to all Venezuelan and Colombian musicians living in the city of Bogotá. Currently, the orchestra is made up of 74 professional musicians and students of great artistic level. There are Venezuelans who come from the National Orchestra System of Venezuela, and also Colombians from different symphonic projects of an excellent musical level.
Que provienen del Sistema Nacional de Orquestas de Venezuela y también colombianos de diferentes procesos musicales sinfónicos de un excelente.
And with that story, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram as well. For teleSUR English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.